Chapter 1. The Invitation. David Richards stared at his phone, thumb hovering over the glowing screen. The message was short, sweet, and loaded with implications. Dinner with my parents tonight? 7 p.m. at Le Jardin. Can you make it? Red heart. Kylee. He read it twice, then a third time, not because he was unsure of the words, but because he liked the way Kylie's texts always sounded like her. Warm, hopeful, and just a little nervous. Le Jardin wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where the bread had its own tasting menu and the water came in bottles with names you couldn't pronounce without a sommelier coaching you. David leaned back in his chair, the faint smell of tempera paint clinging to his shirt. His classroom looked like a rainbow had exploded and then decided to stay for lunch. Paper scraps littered the floor, and a pirate hat sat crookedly on his head, a leftover from today's art adventure, treasure map day. The kids had loved it. They always did. He'd spent the morning teaching them how to draw secret islands and hidden caves, which mostly turned into dragons, unicorns, and one suspiciously accurate sketch of a cheeseburger. "Mr. Richards, is this a real treasure map?" A boy named Ethan had asked earlier, holding up a sheet covered in glitter and what looked like ketchup stains. David had crouched down, eye level with the 7-year-old. "If you believe it is, then yes. But maybe don't eat the treasure." The kid had grinned, missing 2 front teeth, and declared, "Best class ever." That was the thing about kids. They didn't care if you wore designer suits or drove a car that cost more than their house. They cared if you made art fun. And David loved that. He loved the honesty, the chaos, the way they reminded him that life wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about showing up and being real. His phone buzzed again. "Kylee, following up, please say yes. They really want to meet you. I really want them to meet you." David smiled faintly. He wasn't worried. He'd given up on the idea that it was his job to impress anyone years ago. They either liked him as he was, or they didn't. Simple as that. He typed back, looking forward to it. "See you at 7. Send." He tossed the phone onto his desk and peeled off the pirate hat, running a hand through his dark hair. Tonight wasn't about proving himself. It was about showing up for Kylee. 9 months together, and she'd never made him feel small for living a middle-class life, while she came from old money. That was one of the things he loved about her. She didn't play games. At least, not intentionally. Sometimes she misunderstood him, sure, but that was just 2 different worlds colliding and trying to speak the same language. "Big night," a voice called from the doorway. David looked up to see Marissa, the music teacher, leaning against the frame with a grin. "You look like a man about to meet the royal family." "Close," David said, grabbing his jacket. "Kylie's parents." Marissa whistled low. "The Davenports?" "As in the Davenports?" David shrugged. "Apparently." "Wow. Good luck surviving the interrogation." He smiled, calm as ever. "Luck's got nothing to do with it." Marissa laughed. "You're either brave or crazy." "Both," David said, slinging the jacket over his shoulder. "See you Monday." As he walked out of the school, the late autumn air hit his face, crisp and cool. He thought about his father's words, the lesson that had shaped him more than any other. Respect is earned, not owed. Money can't buy respect. Only character can. Donovan Davenport could be worth $1 billion, but that didn't mean David owed him anything except basic courtesy. And that, David decided as he headed home to change, he could give freely. Chapter 2. Kylie's perspective. Kylee Davenport stood in front of her closet like it was a battlefield. Silk blouses, tailored dresses, and shoes that cost more than most people's rent stared back at her, demanding a decision. She chewed her lip, phone in hand, rereading David's reply for the 10th time, looking forward to it. "See you at 7. He sounded calm. Of course he did. David was always calm. That was one of the things she loved about him, his ability to stay grounded when the world tilted sideways. But tonight wasn't just any night. Tonight was the night. The one where her parents would meet the man she'd been dating for 9 months. The man who made her laugh until her stomach hurt. The man who dressed up as a pirate for his students because he thought art should feel like an adventure. She smiled at the memory of him sending her a selfie last week. Eye patch, fake parrot, and a grin that could melt glaciers. Her friends had teased her endlessly. "You're dating the hot art teacher? That's like a rom-com waiting to happen." And maybe it was. Except rom-coms didn't usually involve fathers like Donovan Davenport. Kylie's stomach tightened. Her dad wasn't cruel, but he had a way of turning dinner into an interrogation. He'd done it with every boyfriend she'd ever brought home. The last one had practically sprinted for the door after Donovan asked about his 5-year financial plan. Kylee still cringed at the memory. "Sweetheart, are you planning to stare at those clothes until they magically dress you?" Her mother's voice floated in from the doorway. Kylee turned to see her mom, elegant as always in a cream sweater and pearls, holding a glass of white wine like it was part of her hand. "I'm deciding," Kylee said. "Or the navy dress," her mom suggested. "It says sophisticated but approachable." Kylee rolled her eyes. "It's dinner, Mom, not a job interview." Her mom smiled knowingly. "With your father, it's always a job interview." Kylee groaned and flopped onto the bed. "Why does he have to be like that?" "Because he loves you," her mom said gently, sitting beside her. "And because he's terrified you'll end up with someone who doesn't deserve you." Kylee stared at the ceiling. "David deserves me." "I believe you," her mom said, patting her knee. "But your father needs convincing." Kylee sat up, determination sparking in her chest. "Then he'll see what I see. David's amazing." Her mom's smile softened. "You really like him, don't you?" Kylie's throat tightened. "I think I love him." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. Her mom's eyes warmed, and for a moment, Kylie felt safe. Then her phone buzzed, a calendar reminder. Dinner at Le Jardin, 7 p.m. She glanced at the time. 2 hours to go. Kylie stood, grabbed the navy dress, and slipped it on. Sophisticated but approachable. Fine. If her dad wanted a job interview, she'd make sure David aced it, because if anyone could, it was him. As she zipped up the dress, she whispered to herself, "This is going to go perfectly." She believed it. She had to. Chapter 3. The calm before dinner. David Richards stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his shirt. It wasn't designer, but it was clean, pressed, and fit him well. Navy blue. Safe, simple, and honest. He wasn't about to play dress up for Donovan Davenport. If the man wanted a show, he'd have to buy tickets somewhere else. He glanced at his reflection, running a hand through his hair. He looked like himself. Good. That was the goal. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Kylie. "Can't wait to see you tonight." Red heart. David smiled faintly, typing back. "Same here." He meant it. Despite the looming dinner, he was looking forward to seeing her. Kylie had a way of making the world feel lighter, even when it was heavy. He slipped on his jacket and headed to the kitchen, where his best friend and occasional roommate, Nate, was raiding the fridge like a man on a mission. Nate was a gym teacher, perpetually hungry, and perpetually amused by David's life choices. "Big night?" Nate asked, mouthful of leftover pizza. "Dinner with Kylie's parents," David said, grabbing his keys. Nate froze mid-chew. "The Davenports? Dude, that's like meeting royalty. Do you need me to teach you the proper fork hierarchy?" David chuckled. "Pretty sure I can handle a salad fork." "Yeah, but can you handle Donovan Davenport?" Nate leaned against the counter, smirking. "Word on the street is he eats boyfriends for breakfast." David shrugged. "Then I hope he's not hungry." Nate laughed so hard he nearly choked. "You're either fearless or insane." "Both," David said, echoing his earlier words to Marissa. He slipped his wallet into his pocket. "It's just dinner." "Dinner with a billionaire," Nate corrected. David paused at the door, his tone calm but firm. "Money doesn't impress me, Nate. Never has." Nate raised his hands in mock surrender. "All right, Gandhi. Just don't start a philosophical debate over the creme brulee." David grinned and stepped outside, the cool November air brushing his face. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made you stop and stare if you weren't in a rush. He wasn't rushing. He had time. He always made time for things that mattered. As he walked to his car, his mind drifted, not to Donovan, not to the restaurant, but to his classroom earlier that day. The chaos had been glorious. 20 kids in pirate hats, glitter everywhere, and one boy who insisted on calling him Captain Dave. He'd laughed so hard his stomach hurt. That was the kind of interrogation he liked. The kind where the toughest question was, can dragons live on treasure islands? He slid into his car, started the engine, and let the hum settle his thoughts. Tonight wasn't about proving himself. It was about showing up for Kylie. And if her father wanted to measure him, well, David had nothing to hide. He knew who he was. He knew what he wanted. And he wasn't about to apologize for either. Chapter 4. First impressions. Le Jardin smelled like money and rosemary. The kind of place where the lighting was soft enough to make everyone look like they belonged in a magazine spread, and the waiters moved like shadows, silent, efficient, and vaguely judgmental. David stepped inside, his jacket slung neatly over his arm, scanning the room until he spotted Kylie waving from a corner table. She looked stunning in navy, her smile bright enough to cut through the candlelight. For a moment, the tension in his chest eased. Then he saw the man sitting beside her. Donovan Davenport had presence. Not the loud, boisterous kind, but the kind that filled a room without trying. His suit was tailored to perfection, his silver hair combed back like he'd stepped out of an ad for power and success. Beside him sat Kylie's mother, elegant and warm, her pearls catching the light as she smiled at David. David walked over, calm and steady, like he was entering his own classroom. Kylie stood to greet him, her hand slipping into his. "You made it," she whispered, relief in her voice. "Wouldn't miss it," David said, squeezing her fingers gently before turning to her parents. "Mr. Davenport," David said, offering his hand. "Mrs. Davenport." Donovan's handshake was firm, his eyes sharp. "David Richards," he said, as if tasting the name. "Art teacher, correct?" "Yes, sir," David replied evenly. "Elementary school." Donovan nodded slowly, like he was filing that away under interesting but unimpressive. "And how long have you been teaching art?" 5 years, David said, sliding into the chair Kylie pulled out for him. "I love it." Kylie's mom smiled. "That sounds wonderful. Kylie tells us the kids adore you." "They do," David said with a small grin. "Mostly because I let them paint dragons on treasure maps." Kylie laughed softly, but Donovan didn't. He picked up his menu like it was a shield. "Dragons," he said. "Interesting career choice." David didn't flinch. "It's not about dragons. It's about creativity. Teaching kids to see the world differently." Donovan's lips curved, not quite a smile. "And what about your own ambitions? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Kylie shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, it's a fair question," Donovan said, eyes locked on David. David met his gaze without hesitation. "In 5 years, I hope I'm still teaching, still making art, and maybe raising a family." Donovan's brow lifted. "A family? On a teacher's salary?" Kylie's cheeks flushed. "Dad." David's voice stayed calm, steady. Money doesn't raise kids. Love does. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Donovan leaned back, studying him like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Kylie's mom cleared her throat, trying to soften the edges. That's a lovely sentiment. Donovan wasn't done. Tell me, David, do you own your home? Kylie's eyes widened. Dad, David didn't blink. No, I rent. Hmm. Donovan's tone was almost dismissive. And your car? Reliable. Kylie's voice cracked. Dad, stop. David's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed even. It gets me where I need to go. Donovan smirked faintly, like he'd scored a point. Interesting. Kylee looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Her mom shot Donovan a warning glance, but he ignored it. The waiter arrived to take drink orders, and for a moment, the tension eased, but only for a moment. David sat quietly, his expression calm, his eyes steady. He wasn't angry. He wasn't intimidated. He was simply done playing games. Chapter 5. The Walkout. David sat back in his chair, the candlelight flickering against Donovan Davenport's sharp features. The man had asked 3 questions too many, each one a little more pointed than the last. Salary, home ownership, car reliability. It wasn't curiosity, it was a test. And David had no interest in playing. Kylie's fingers twisted in her lap, her voice soft but urgent. Dad, please. Donovan didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on David, like a hawk circling prey. You seem very comfortable with mediocrity. The words landed like a stone in water, heavy, rippling through the silence. Kylie's breath caught. Her mother's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. David didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. He simply nodded once, slow and deliberate, as if confirming something to himself. Then he slid his chair back. The sound was soft, but in that hushed restaurant, it might as well have been a gunshot. Kylie's head snapped up. David. He stood, calm as ever, reaching into his pocket. A crisp bill landed on the table, enough to cover his meal, plus a generous tip. He adjusted his jacket, his movements precise, controlled. Thank you for your time, Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, David said, his voice steady, polite. It was enlightening. Kylie's heart thudded against her ribs. Wait, what are you doing? David turned to her, his expression gentle, almost tender. Kylee, he said softly, I hope you find happiness someday. Truly. Her throat tightened. David, but he was already stepping away, his posture straight, his stride unhurried. No anger, no drama, just quiet dignity. He didn't look back. Not once. The table was silent, frozen in shock. Donovan's smug confidence faltered, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like confusion. Kylie's mother stared at her husband, eyes wide, hand covering her mouth. Kylie's voice cracked. Mom, what just happened? Her mother swallowed hard, then whispered the words that shattered Kylie's world. Honey, I think David just broke up with you. Kylee blinked, the sentence hitting like a slap. Broke up? No, that wasn't possible. They were fine. They were happy. They were. She turned toward the door, but David was gone. Chapter 6. Fallout. Kylee sat in stunned silence, her pulse pounding in her ears. The restaurant's soft music felt like a cruel joke now, a soundtrack to disaster. David's chair sat empty, the crisp bill he'd left still resting on the white linen like a farewell note. Her mother was the first to speak, voice low and trembling. Donovan, what did you do? Donovan set his wine glass down with deliberate calm, though his jaw tightened. I asked questions. You interrogated him. Her mother snapped, pearls glinting as she turned toward him. You humiliated him. Kylie's voice cracked. He just walked out. Her throat burned. He didn't even look back. Her mother's gaze softened. Honey, I think that was the point. Kylee shook her head, panic clawing at her chest. No, he wouldn't just. He loves me. She clung to the words like a lifeline, but they felt fragile now, brittle against the memory of David's calm, steady voice. I hope you find happiness someday. Her father leaned back, unruffled. If he can't handle a little pressure, he's not the man for you. Kylie's hands curled into fists. Pressure? Dad, you treated him like a suspect in a crime scene. Donovan's eyes narrowed. I treated him like a man who wants to marry my daughter. That's not a game, Kylee. Her mother cut in, sharp as glass. And what exactly did you learn tonight? That he's honest? That he has dignity? Because that's what I saw. Kylie's breath hitched. Dignity. Yes, that was David, walking out without anger, without drama, just done. The image burned in her mind, and it hurt more than if he'd shouted. Her father's voice softened, but only slightly. I have a responsibility to protect you. Kylee slammed her napkin on the table. From what? A man who loves me? A man who teaches kids to believe in themselves? God forbid I end up with someone who values character over cash. Heads turned from nearby tables, but Kylee didn't care. Her chest heaved, her eyes stung, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to scream in a 5-star restaurant. Her mother reached for her hand. Sweetheart, maybe give him time. Kylee swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Time. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she typed. Can we talk? Please. She hit send, staring at the screen like it might save her. No reply. She tried again. David, I'm sorry. I didn't know he'd. Please, just talk to me. Still nothing. Kylie's heart sank, heavy and cold. She shoved the phone into her purse and stood abruptly. I'm leaving. Her father frowned. Kylee, don't, she said, voice sharp as broken glass. Just don't. She walked out of Le Jardin, heels clicking against marble, her mother calling after her. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and merciless. She looked up at the city lights, blinking through tears, and whispered to herself, "I think I just lost him." Chapter 7. The day after, David Richards woke up to the sound of his alarm and the faint ache of last night lingering in his chest. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, replaying the scene at Le Jardin. The candlelight, Donovan's sharp words, Kylie's wide eyes. He didn't regret walking out. Not for a second. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. He swung his legs out of bed, dressed in his usual work attire, comfortable slacks, a shirt that could survive paint splatters, and headed to school. If there was one thing guaranteed to keep his mind busy, it was 20 kids armed with glue sticks and glitter. By 9:15, his classroom looked like a crime scene. Glitter everywhere. Paper scraps on the floor. A suspicious puddle of blue paint near the supply shelf. David stood at the front, pirate hat perched on his head, because today was Monster Mash Art Day. The kids were supposed to create friendly monsters out of construction paper and pipe cleaners. Instead, they were creating chaos. Mr. Richards, Ethan, the same boy who'd asked about treasure maps yesterday, waved a pair of googly eyes in the air. "Can my monster have 6 heads?" David grinned. "If you can glue them on without breaking the laws of physics, go for it." Across the room, Lily was sobbing because her monster had only one eye. "It looks weird," she wailed. David crouched beside her, voice gentle. "Weird is wonderful, Lily. Picasso made noses where ears should be. You're practically a genius." She sniffled, then brightened. "Really? Absolutely," David said, handing her a glitter pen like it was a magic wand. "Give your monster some sparkle power." He straightened, scanning the room. 2 boys were sword fighting with paintbrushes. A girl was trying to glue a pipe cleaner to her hair. And in the corner, someone had drawn what looked suspiciously like a cheeseburger monster again. David chuckled under his breath. This was why he loved his job. Kids didn't care about status or bank accounts. They cared about whether their monster could defeat a dragon in an imaginary battle. They cared about joy. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Probably Kylie. Probably an apology. He wasn't ready. Not yet. "Mr. Richards," another voice called. "My monster needs a name." David turned, hands on his hips. "All right, class. Naming ceremony time. Who's got the weirdest monster?" 20 hands shot up like fireworks. David laughed, the sound easing something tight in his chest. For a moment, the memory of Donovan's smug face faded, replaced by googly eyes and glitter explosions. He loved this chaos. He needed this chaos. As the bell rang and the kids filed out, leaving behind a battlefield of art supplies, David sank into his chair. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, staring at the screen. "Kylie, can we talk? Please." He stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he locked the screen and set the phone face down. "Not yet." He leaned back, closing his eyes, and whispered to the empty room. "Love isn't enough if we're not on the same page." Interlude. Donovan's reflection. Donovan Davenport sat alone in his study, the glow of the city lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His glass of scotch sat untouched on the mahogany desk, the ice melting slowly, like time slipping through his fingers. He replayed the dinner in his mind, the calm way David had stood, the quiet dignity in his voice, the absence of anger. Donovan had expected defensiveness, maybe even desperation. Instead, he got something he hadn't seen in years, a man who knew his worth without needing anyone's approval. It unsettled him. He leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the framed photo on the wall. Him and Kylie when she was little, perched on his shoulders, laughing like the world was hers. He'd promised himself he'd protect that smile, no matter what. But tonight, when she stormed out of the restaurant, eyes blazing with hurt, Donovan felt something crack inside. His wife's words echoed in his head. That man has dignity. Dignity. Donovan had built an empire on ambition, on numbers, on winning. But dignity? That was harder to measure. Harder to buy? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Maybe he'd gone too far. Maybe protecting Kylie didn't mean interrogating every man who loved her. Maybe it meant trusting her judgment and admitting when he was wrong. Donovan set the glass aside and reached for his phone. He stared at Kylie's contact photo, her smile bright and fearless, and whispered to the empty room. "I just wanted to keep you safe." But safe wasn't the same as happy. And for the first time in years, Donovan wondered if he'd been protecting the wrong thing. Chapter 8. The Classroom Ambush. Kylie Davenport had never set foot in an elementary school since graduating from one. And now she was striding down a hallway lined with finger-painted masterpieces and motivational posters that said things like, "Mistakes are proof you're trying." Her heels clicked against the linoleum, sounding far too formal for a place that smelled faintly of crayons and glue. She clutched her purse like a lifeline, rehearsing what she'd say when she saw him. "David, I'm sorry. I should have stopped my dad. Please don't give up on us." Simple. Honest. Except every time she pictured his calm face from last night, her throat tightened. A burst of laughter erupted from the classroom at the end of the hall, the one with a paper sign that read, "Welcome to Monster Mash Art Day." Kylie hesitated, then peeked inside. Chaos. Pure, glitter-coated chaos. 20 kids darted around like caffeinated squirrels. Pipe cleaners dangled from the ceiling. A boy was wearing a cardboard box on his head, declaring himself king of monsters. Another was crawling under a table, growling like a feral cat. And in the middle of it all stood David Richards, pirate hat tilted rakishly, sleeves rolled up, grinning like this was the best day of his life. Kylie's heart squeezed. He looked so happy, so alive, so completely in his element. All right, crew, David called, holding up a glue stick like a sword. Who's ready for the monster parade? A chorus of cheers shook the room. Kylie stepped inside, and instantly 3 kids noticed her. Who's that? One whispered loudly. Is she a monster judge? Another asked, eyes wide. Kylie smiled awkwardly. Oh no, just visiting. David turned and froze. For a split second, surprise flickered across his face, followed by something harder to read. He set the glue stick down slowly. Kylie. Her name sounded like a question and a warning all at once. She swallowed. Hi. The kids swarmed her like paparazzi. Are you Mr. Richards' girlfriend? One demanded. Kylie flushed. Do you like monsters? Another asked, shoving a glitter-covered creature in her face. She looks fancy, a third whispered. Like a princess. David cleared his throat, voice calm but firm. All right, crew, give our guests some space. Back to your monsters. The kids obeyed. Mostly, though one lingered to ask, are you going to marry him? Before darting away with a giggle. Kylie's cheeks burned. David's expression didn't change. He gestured toward the door. We should talk outside. She followed him into the hallway, her heels suddenly too loud, her pulse louder still. He closed the door behind them, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. His pirate hat was still on, and somehow that made this harder. Kylie, he said quietly. Why are you here? She gripped her purse, words tumbling out. Because I'm sorry. I should have stopped my dad. I should have. David held up a hand, calm as ever. Kylie, this isn't about your dad. Her throat tightened. Then what is it about? He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. It's about respect. About knowing we're on the same page. I love you, she blurted, voice cracking. Isn't that enough? David's eyes softened, but his tone stayed firm. Love matters. But if we're going to build a life together, it can't be a tug of war between us and your family. Kylie blinked back tears. I'll fix it. I'll make him understand. David shook his head slowly. Kylie, I don't need him to understand. I need you to choose what you want. Her breath caught. I choose you. For the first time since last night, David smiled, small, tired, but real. Then prove it. Kylie nodded, determination sparking like a flame. I will. Behind the door, a kid yelled, Mr. Richards. My monster ate the glue, followed by hysterical laughter. David sighed, glancing back at the chaos, then at Kylie. Welcome to my world, he said dryly. Kylie smiled through her tears. I think I like it. Chapter 9. Collision course. David was wiping blue paint off his desk when the knock came. He expected Kylie. Instead, Donovan Davenport stood in the doorway, looking strangely out of place among glitter explosions and googly eyes. David froze, rag in hand. Mr. Davenport. Donovan nodded, his usual commanding presence softened by something David couldn't name. Do you have a minute? David considered saying no. He considered telling him to leave. Instead, he gestured toward the empty chair. Make it quick. I've got a monster parade in 10. Donovan sat, glancing around at the chaos. You love this job. David didn't answer. He didn't need to. Donovan cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. David raised an eyebrow. For dinner? Or for assuming dignity comes with a price tag? The older man winced. Both. He leaned forward, voice low. I misjudged you. That's on me. David studied him, searching for cracks in the armor. He found them, in the tightness around Donovan's eyes, in the way his hands clasped like he was holding something fragile. Why the change of heart? Donovan's gaze flicked to the classroom door. Kylie, she's hurt, and I realized I'd rather see her happy than right. David's jaw tightened. That's a start. Before Donovan could reply, the door burst open and Kylie stumbled in, breathless, clutching a flyer. Her eyes widened when she saw her father. What are you? I was leaving, Donovan said quickly, standing. He looked at David. For what it's worth, you're the kind of man I'd want my daughter to marry, if she chooses you. David said nothing. Donovan nodded once and slipped out, leaving a silence thick enough to choke on. Kylie stepped forward, holding out the flyer like a peace offering. There's an art showcase next weekend. Local artists, community event. They want you to submit something. David frowned. How do you know that? I called the organizer. Kylie admitted, cheeks flushed. I thought, maybe if you had something big to focus on, something that matters to you. We could, her voice cracked. We could start over. David stared at the flyer. Bright colors, bold letters, celebrate creativity. It felt like a lifeline and a test. He looked at Kylie, her eyes shining with hope and fear. You think an art show fixes this? No, she whispered. But maybe it reminds you why you let me in your life in the first place. David's chest tightened. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe this could work. But trust wasn't paint. It didn't dry overnight. I'll think about it, he said finally. Kylie nodded, blinking back tears. That's all I'm asking. Behind them, a kid yelled, Mr. Richards. My monster ate the glitter, followed by hysterical laughter. David sighed, rubbing his forehead. Kylie smiled faintly. You really do live in another universe. David looked at her, something soft breaking through the walls. Maybe, but I wanted you in it. For the first time since Le Jardin, hope flickered between them, fragile, but real. Chapter 10. The gesture, the community center buzzed with life. Bright banners hung from the rafters, tables lined with canvases and sculptures, each piece a testament to creativity. Children darted between displays, their laughter mingling with the hum of conversation. It smelled like paint and possibility. David stood near his easel, adjusting the final strokes on his submission, a sprawling piece titled Uncharted Islands. It was chaotic and colorful, a tribute to the wild imagination of his students. He'd almost backed out, but Kylie's quiet persistence, and the way her eyes had pleaded for a second chance, had tipped the scales. He wasn't here for Donovan. He wasn't here for anyone's approval. He was here because art mattered, because kids mattered, because somewhere deep down, he still wanted Kylie in his world. Mr. Richards. Ethan barreled toward him. Pirate hat ask you. Your painting looks like a treasure map. David grinned. That's the idea. Before he could say more, a ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. And then David saw him, Donovan Davenport, walking into the room like a man who belonged everywhere, except this time. He didn't look like he was here to dominate. He looked like he was here to listen. Kylie trailed behind him, her expression a mix of hope and nerves. David's chest tightened. Donovan approached slowly, stopping in front of David's canvas. He studied it for a long moment, his silver brows furrowed, not in judgment, but in thought. Then he turned to David. It's beautiful, Donovan said quietly. Full of life. David blinked. Thank you. Donovan's gaze softened. I came here to tell you something. I was wrong. The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Kylie's breath caught. Donovan continued, voice low but steady. I thought success was about control, about making sure my daughter never struggled. But last night, I realized something. She doesn't need me to protect her from you. She needs me to respect her choices. He paused, swallowing hard. And yours. David said nothing, letting the silence speak. Donovan reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. The center's art program is underfunded. I made a donation in your name. Enough to keep these kids creating for years. David stared at the envelope, stunned. Why? Donovan's eyes met his. Because you reminded me what matters. Not money. Not power. Character. His voice cracked, just slightly. You have it, David. More than most men I know. Kylie's eyes shimmered with tears. David felt something shift inside him. A wall crumbling, a weight lifting. He took the envelope, fingers brushing Donovan's. Thank you. Donovan nodded, then stepped back, giving them space. Kylie moved closer, her voice barely a whisper. He means it. David looked at her, at the hope trembling in her smile. Do you? Her answer was a breath against his skin. Always. For the first time in days, David let himself smile. Wide, unguarded, real. Around them, kids laughed, paint splattered, and life felt messy and perfect all at once. Chapter 11. After the lights fade, the art showcase had wound down, the laughter and chatter replaced by the soft hum of cleanup. Volunteers stacked chairs, the scent of acrylic paint lingering in the air like a memory. David stood near his canvas, fingers tracing the dried strokes of uncharted islands, as if grounding himself in the chaos he'd created. Kylie approached quietly, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She carried 2 paper cups of coffee, steam curling into the cool evening air. Peace offering, she said softly, holding one out. David accepted it, their fingers brushing. Thanks. For a moment, they stood in silence, sipping coffee while the world around them dismantled. Kylie's heart thudded like a drum. She'd rehearsed a dozen speeches, but now, none of them felt right. You were incredible tonight, she said finally. The kids, the art, you lit up the whole room. David smiled faintly. It wasn't about me. It was, she whispered. Because you make people believe in something bigger than themselves. He looked at her then, really looked, past the perfect hair and polished dress, past the nervous smile. Kylie, he said quietly, why did you fight so hard? Her throat tightened. Because I love you. Because I can't stand the thought of losing someone who makes me better. David's jaw flexed, his eyes searching hers. And what happens when your world collides with mine again? When your father forgets tonight and starts measuring me by numbers? Kylie stepped closer, her voice steady now. Then I remind him that love isn't a ledger. And if he can't accept that, he loses me too. David stared at her, the weight of her words sinking deep. For 9 months, he'd wondered if she could stand in the storm with him. Tonight, she'd answered. He set his coffee down, reaching for her hand. I don't need perfection, Kylie. I just need honesty. And someone who won't run when life gets messy. Her fingers tightened around his. Then you've got me. For the first time since Le Jardin, David let the walls fall. He pulled her into his arms, her head resting against his chest, the smell of paint and coffee wrapping around them like a promise. Outside, the city lights shimmered, and inside, amid scattered glitter and half-finished monsters, 2 people chose each other. Not for wealth, not for status, but for something far rarer. Something real. Chapter 12. Glitter and champagne. The Davenport estate had never seen this much glitter. Kylie stood in the grand ballroom, staring at the chaos unfolding like a rom-com finale gone rogue. The engagement party was supposed to be elegant. White linens, crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing like rivers of sophistication. And for the first hour, it was. Until David's students arrived. Technically, they weren't invited. But when Ethan overheard David talking about a big party, the 7-year-old had declared, we're coming. Monsters need cake. And apparently, he'd rallied the entire art class. Now, 20 kids in pirate hats and monster masks were tearing through the room like confetti tornadoes. Pipe cleaners dangled from the floral arrangements. Someone had glued googly eyes to the champagne bottles. And in the center of it all, David Richards, future husband, art teacher extraordinaire, was laughing so hard he nearly spilled his drink. Kylie couldn't even be mad. Not when he looked that happy. Mr. Richards, Ethan yelled, climbing onto a chair. We made you a present. He held up a giant poster covered in glitter, paint, and what looked suspiciously like macaroni. In bold letters, it read, Congrats Captain Dave and Princess Kylee. Kylie burst out laughing, tears pricking her eyes. Princess, David grinned, slipping an arm around her waist. You wore heels to Monster Mash Day. They never forgot. Kylie leaned into him, her heart full. Around them, Donovan stood near the champagne fountain, watching the chaos with a look that was equal parts horror and amusement. When a kid tried to glue a pipe cleaner to his cufflink, Donovan chuckled and let him. Kylie's mom approached, pearls gleaming, voice warm. Well, she said, surveying the glitter-strewn floor. It's not the party I imagined. Kylie smiled. It's perfect. David kissed her temple, his voice low and certain. Messy, loud, real. Kylie turned to face him fully, her diamond ring catching the light. Just like us. He smiled, eyes crinkling. Wouldn't have it any other way. As the kids launched into an impromptu monster parade through the ballroom, Donovan reluctantly leading the line with a pirate hat. Kylie laughed until her cheeks hurt. This wasn't the life her father had pictured for her. It wasn't the life she'd pictured either. It was better. Because in a world obsessed with perfection, she'd found someone who loved the chaos. Someone who loved her. And as David pulled her close, glitter raining down like confetti, Kylie whispered the only words that mattered. Forever.